Thanks to the selfish gene theory and evolutionary psychology, in any political system in which decisions are made based on facts, it can now be derived from first principles that it is not physically possible to build any form of government that's immune to corruption. As biological organisms, every politician on Earth is guaranteed to be inherently self-interested. From that it follows that the only thing that can preserve democracy is an effective balance of power between people and their government. Democracy does not exist because the inherently good founding fathers carried it down to us from a mountaintop. Democracy exists because we, the people, do whatever it takes to prevent anyone from taking it away from us. All of these books were written for people with high school educations. All of our politicians went to college. Am I the only person in America who believes that people who are entrusted to make decisions that affect everyone in the world should have at least a high school level grasp of how the world actually works? Right now, out on the front lines of this struggle, protesters who are demanding that political decisions be based on facts are being punished. The scientists who discovered global unsustainability have been saying from the very beginning that if global disaster is going to be prevented, radical social change is necessary. But for the past 9 years, inherently self-interested politicians have been using the war on terror to trick the public into equating radical social change with terrorism. 8 organizers of the protests at the Republican National Convention were arrested and charged with conspiring to riot in the furtherance of terrorism, and each faced 12 years in prison. You can see them tell their side of the story in their online video, Terrorizing Dissent. The terrorism charges have been dropped, but they're still being charged with conspiring to incite a riot. At every big protest like that, there are always thousands of police in riot gear posted between the people who are making the decisions and the tens of thousands of people who always come to demand that the decisions be made based on evidence. Which means people who know about the greenhouse effect and know enough about politics to get to the top of our 18th century political and economic system are making a lot of plans they don't want the public to be involved in, which is exactly what I said was going to happen. I didn't see all of the Origins conference, but all of the speakers I did see were a lot older than 25. Which is why they have the luxury of thinking about things like this in abstract terms. I was born in 1974, so I was about 10 when we crossed the line, which means I never got to vote on whether we crossed it or not. If everything I've told you about here was turned into required courses in college, that still wouldn't solve the problem, for 2 reasons. First, what good would it do everyone who doesn't go to college? Second, that wouldn't be effective education for the people with the college educations either, because that's not how human psychology works. The things you learn first are the things you learn the best, especially when you learn them in childhood. If you spend your whole childhood being taught lies and superstitions, and don't learn the science until you're an adult, by that time, all it's going to be to you is a bunch of abstract ideas a bunch of scientists thought of. By that point, you'll already be basing the choices you make in life on the superstitions you were taught to believe were true. President Obama must understand that his own presidency was only made possible through the struggle of Dr. King and others. And he must understand that Dr. King was an outlaw. Dr. King didn't protest segregation by obeying the law. He protested segregation by breaking the law. Malcolm X was an outlaw too, and so was Nelson Mandela. Segregation and apartheid weren't ended because the protesters acted in a way their oppressors approved of. They were ended because the protesters did whatever it took to eliminate their oppressors' choice to continue oppressing them. In aviation, we call that take action as necessary to meet the needs of the situation. If all human behavior was motivated by some sort of inherent goodness, like the Founding Fathers believed, then we could save the world by everyone waving signs and singing songs and feeling sorry for all those poor, misguided business people and politicians in the G20 meetings who all have college educations but never learned about exponential growth and the laws of thermodynamics. Eventually, those inherently good but misguided people would realize their mistake and change their ways. But in real life, where all human behavior is motivated by inherent self-interest, as long as some people have the choice to benefit themselves by exploiting other people, some people are going to make that choice. I don't mean to villainize President Obama specifically. He seems like a nice guy. But he also has the same job George W. Bush used to have. We've all seen what the United States government is capable of doing. That means, if President Obama doesn't do all the same things George W. Bush did, it's because he's choosing not to do them, not because we have any way of stopping him. Democracy will never be safe as long as anyone has the choice to be the next George W. Bush. This is why public protest, including civil disobedience, is the backbone of democracy. Political movements don't start with people voting for stuff, because in the beginning, there aren't enough people in the movement to win elections. And that's why political movements start out with civil disobedience, like Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat. The political system makes certain things happen because those things are the law, and other things are against the law. That's why making the old thing stop happening and making the new thing start happening means breaking the law. That's why people in the globalized civil rights movement do things like blockade streets to try to prevent delegates to the G20 meetings from going to their meetings. If those G20 delegates would have bothered learning some high school level science before they got their jobs making decisions that affect everyone in the world, they would understand that the protesters outside their meetings are the reason we still have a democracy. And if they don't understand that, we have a serious problem. In a secular government that was founded on pre-scientific ideas, and where the majority of votes are cast by people the education system has kept functionally scientifically illiterate, those of us who are struggling for self-determination through informed decision-making for everyone are the long arm of secular government of, by, and for the people, and simultaneously, we're outlaws. How's that for a self-contradiction in the Constitution?